On this prequel episode, we're recapping the Crazy Rich Asians poll, learning about single location storytelling, and previewing Rear Window. Welcome back to This Film Is Lit, the podcast where we're talking about movies that are based on books. Let's get into it. I have a softball game. I have to eat. Katie, let's talk about the poll about Crazy Rich Asians. What did you prefer the book slightly? Mm-hmm. What did our fans come down on?
Well, we didn't get as much feedback this time.
Yeah, which makes sense. I don't know how many people have read this book.
Yeah, I think probably fewer people have read the book.
Yeah.
So there were only a handful of votes, like literally less than 10 votes.
Also, our audience, this isn't necessarily in their wheelhouse of movies. Probably either. We have a lot of like, fantasy, sci-fi, kind of like young adult type stuff.
Yeah. This is a little different.
Yeah.
But the Facebook poll went to the book entirely,
mm-hmm.
and the Twitter poll went to the movie entirely.
Well, there you go.
The Twitter poll did get more votes, so I guess we could give the listener feedback to the movie.
Yeah.
We had a comment from one of our followers on Twitter, at Trivial Theater.
Oh, yeah.
Who said, the book was fascinating and made Singapore sound so cool, but the movie made me want to travel there, jump on a plane as soon as I left the theater.
Cool.
Which is fair. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for that kind of visual element of a film.
It's a little more visceral.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about a really cool location like that.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, our viewers slightly chose the movie. But kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
It was not enough, not quite enough of a turnout for a good scientific study. Didn't have quite big enough of a sample size. But we'll give it to the book in that regard, or the movie in that regard. Let's move on to learning things with This Film Is Lit and talk about single location storytelling.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
All right, so single location storytelling denotes a story that takes place exclusively in one location. So it's a pretty self-explanatory name.
Yes, it is.
I found a couple of examples that I thought people might recognize. 12 Angry Men, My Dinner with Andre,
Yep.
Buried.
Yeah. So these are all movies?
Yes, they're all movies.
Okay, because I thought you were going to say some books, and because the first one that popped in my head was Buried, which is an interesting film, Ryan Reynolds. 12 Angry Men. Yeah,
I kind of focused on the movie aspect of it, because I think visually there's a lot to do with there.
Yeah.
Phone Booth.
I don't think that's actually true, but it's mostly I think he moves around a bit at the end.
Some of these are a little bit like 12.
I can't remember. It's been a long time.
12 Angry Men is technically bookended by outside shots,
right?
But the meat of the story takes place. Yeah. So some of these are
Phone Booth might be. I literally can't remember, but I could have swore that some of the end of it took place in other places, but I could be wrong about that. It's been a long time since I saw it when it came out in theaters. So, but yeah.
And then I think this one fudges it a little bit too. Panic Room.
Yeah, I mean, it takes place in the same house, which I guess, I think mostly, again, it's been a long time since I've seen that one.
It's been a long time since I've seen that one, too. And then two other Hitchcock films, Rope and Lifeboat.
I haven't seen either of them. I thought Rope took place a little bit more of an area, like a pretty small area, but because it's all...
Well, I mean, single location storytelling can be...
I guess that's fair. It doesn't have to be one room.
Right.
Like Buried is an extreme example. It's literally inside a coffin the entire film, and you go nowhere else for the entire film. But I guess you could expand it to a building.
Right.
Clue takes place entirely in one location.
Entirely in one building. And I would say that this is kind of defined by minimalism in set pieces, and kind of overcoming the storytelling challenges of that, because there's really no room for mistakes in characterization and dialogue when you don't have different locations or location changes as a story element.
This is true.
But I think a good storyteller can use that single location to augment their story. So, we have something like Buried that uses this to emphasize the claustrophobic aspects of the story. Yeah. Like that idea that there is no escape.
Yeah. You don't get you are trapped in there with him the whole time. So he's trapped, you're trapped. That's
Yeah. And then we have something like 12 Angry Men, where the single location forces the viewer to also experience the frustration of the jurors who just want to go home.
Yep.
And I think single location can also allow for a strong script that's maybe rich in dialogue and subtext to stand on its own, without having, like, location can maybe kind of be a distraction sometimes.
Yeah, it could.
But I think, like, for me, the main takeaway is that single location stories can really force the viewer into a character's perspective in a way that is really effective. So I want to think about what Rear Window does with this, and what kind of perspective or, like, ideas they're trying to force us, the viewer, into by staying in that single location. And I haven't read the short story yet, so I'm interested to see if that's the same as the movie.
Yeah.
I think it is.
I think so too, from what I've read.
But I'm interested to see if they do anything different with it, or if it's pretty much the same, like, idea as far as location goes.
Cool. That is a unique thing to kind of think about. I didn't know what we were going to be talking about, but that is something I think pretty unique to this film. I haven't seen Rear Window, so I don't know. But
I saw it years ago.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a unique genre, subgenre. I don't know.
It's a like unique story element.
Yeah. It's not even really a genre or subgenre. It's like a separate type of genre.
Yeah.
Because, like, there are thrillers, there are comedies that could all be set. There are dramas like 12 Angry Men.
And
but then they could all be a subset of that.
You do see this a lot in, like, a thriller or a mystery type of a genre. But it can definitely, you can use it in a lot of different storytelling genres.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, that was single location storytelling. Let's move on and preview Rear Window.
This is the scene of the crime. A crime of passion, filmed in a way you have never seen before, and as no one else would dare attempt. But the screen's master of suspense, the producer-director who shocked the world with Psycho.
I don't have a ton of stuff.
Sorry, not Rear Window. This is, it's now called Rear Window.
Yeah, it's now called Rear Window.
What was it called at the time?
It was originally called It Had to Be Murder.
There you go. It Had to Be Murder. Yeah. So, hey, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of stuff because there was not a ton to find.
It makes sense. It's a short story.
Yeah.
No, I don't think a super well-known short story.
Yeah, not super well-known. But it is a short story by American writer Cornell Woolrich. It was originally published in 1942 under the title It Had to Be Murder, like I said, in Dime Detective magazine. Now, I was a little disappointed. I couldn't find out exactly when the title shift came about.
Yeah.
I looked and looked. So if anybody knows, I would love to know that. Like, if they started calling it Rear Window, like, along with the movie, or if that title shift came earlier.
Before the movie. I would imagine it came after the movie.
I would
imagine
think so.
that
they changed it for the movie, and then they started publishing it under that name.
The short story was like, let's bank on that.
Let's bank on that recognizability. It is also maybe a better title, I think.
Yeah. Without knowing the plot of the short story, it seems like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Woolrich, as an author, his output was actually so prolific, like, he just wrote and wrote and wrote, that he often published under a few different pen names. And this short story was originally published under his name William Irish, instead of his actual name. The story was also purportedly directly inspired by H.G. Wells' short story Through a Window, which I've never read.
I haven't either. I wonder if it's a very similar...
I would be interested to see how similar it is, or, like, what the inspiration was.
Yeah.
Another kind of interesting thing is that this is kind of something of a reversal of Edgar Allan Poe's Murder in the Rue Morgue, where the detective has to solve a murder that happens in a locked room.
Oh, okay.
But in Rear Window, the detective is kind of, like, quote unquote locked in a room.
Yeah.
So you're being forced to solve a murder mystery under very restricted circumstances, where you can't, like, get in close and examine the evidence or interview people or anything.
Yeah. Huh. All right, cool. Well, those are your book facts or short story facts. Let's talk about the movie Rear Window.
This is the apartment of a man named Jeffries, a news photographer whose beat used to be the world. Right now, his world has shrunk down to the size of this window. He's been watching the people across the way. Nobody seems to pull their blinds during a hot spell like this. He knows a lot about them by now. Too much, perhaps.
Rear Window is a 1954 film directed famously by Alfred Hitchcock, written by John Michael Hayes. He also wrote a fair number of movies, but specifically worked with Hitchcock on 3 other films: To Catch a Thief, The Trouble with Harry, and The Man Who Knew Too Much, which I have not seen any of those. I've seen probably 4 or 5 or 6 Hitchcock films, but none of those. I've seen Vertigo, I've seen North by Northwest, I've seen The Birds, I've seen a few other ones.
Yeah, he's now a repeat director for us.
Yeah, The Birds
being
the second one, or the first one. This is considered by many critics and scholars and audience members to be one of, if not the best Hitchcock film. It's up there with Psycho. It's up there with Psycho, with North by Northwest, with Vertigo. Probably, I think, widely regarded as maybe his best films.
Really tight storytelling.
Yeah.
Which you have to have with the single location.
True. It received 4 Academy Award nominations and was ranked number 42 on AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies list, which is a thing they did where basically just the top 100 movies of the last 100 years. It was number 42. In 1997, it was added to the United States National Film Registry in the Library of Congress, which we've done several movies that have been added. The Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz. I think there might have been 1 or 2 others, but that one for sure was. There's also a separate one, which is the World Heritage.
Yes.
Just like the global one, which I know Wizard of Oz is on, and
about that, but I don't remember.
A couple other films, but I don't remember which have been on which. But those are 2 different things. But a lot of times movies that are on the United States one end up also on the UNESCO, I think it is, list. So the film was shot entirely at Paramount Studios because it is a single location story. It took production crews 6 weeks to build the set, which is a really complex set, the courtyard that you see in the movie. It ended up being the largest set of its kind at Paramount at the time. It also had a massive drainage system that they had to build to accommodate the rain sequence. Apparently there's a sequence that takes place while it's raining, and they had, water, I assume, like rain machines, and they had to have this really complex drainage system so that they didn't flood the set and ruin everything. It also had a complex lighting system so that they could create natural-looking day and night landscapes, and I read that they did such a good job and spent so much time designing the lighting system that they could change it from day to night within 45 minutes, which is a pretty impressive turnaround to change all the lights to have it go from looking like daytime to have it look like nighttime, which is a lot of different types of lights and light temperatures and all this sort of thing. It also, I read, at least one of the buildings had working plumbing and electricity.
Oh, cool.
All the apartments in one of the buildings had working plumbing and electricity. It was one of the facts I found. Not all of them had that, not all the apartments, but at least one of the building's apartments had working plumbing and electricity. So the set is based on 2 real-life locations. On Wikipedia, they said 1. And then I did some more researching and found a YouTube video of a guy who went and visited, and it's pretty clearly based on 2 locations. It looks like one of them is a courtyard in Greenwich Village. They're both in Greenwich Village in just 2 different places. One of them is a courtyard on 10th Street between Bleecker and Hudson Street in New York. And that's what the courtyard kind of setup is based upon. And specifically, one of the characters' buildings, it may be the main character, I don't know his name, Jimmy Stewart's character. It's like Thorson or
something like that.
Yeah. His building is based on a building on 125 Christopher Street, which is in the movie, the address of the building given is 125 North Street or something like that. So, but that specific building is based on that address, and the courtyard is based on a slightly different.
So they smashed those 2
together. That's what it sounds like, or what it looked like based on this YouTube video I was watching. Hitchcock used costume designer Edith Head on all of his Paramount films, which this is one of them. Edith Head was a legendary costume designer she won a record 8 Academy Awards for costume design. And she was also and this is very obvious if you see pictures of her. I don't know if you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I do.
She is the inspiration for Edna Mode in The Incredibles. And like I said, if you look up a picture of Edith Head, it is very clear that is where the inspiration for Edna Mode came from. Although she's American, and Edna Mode is has some sort of vaguely European accent.
But Grace Kelly's costumes in this are to die for. That is something I remember from this.
Although veteran Hollywood composer Franz Waxman is credited with the score for the film, His contributions were limited to the opening and the closing titles. And there's a piano tune that a neighbor plays at one point. And this was also Waxman's final score for Hitchcock. The reason that it's only those two things and then that other song is because only the opening and ending credits are non-diegetic. Everything else is diegetic sound in the movie, and we've talked about that before on an older episode. But what that is sounds arising from normal life of the characters within the film. So you hear songs and music from his neighbors playing music, or for him. You hear sounds and all that, but there's no film score.
The sounds come from within the world. Within the world, movie.
Yeah. During shooting, Sir Alfred Hitchcock worked only in Jeff's apartment, right, which I assume is Jimmy Stewart's apartment, if I had to guess. He worked only in Jeff's apartment. The actors and actresses in the other apartments around the square wore flesh-colored earpieces so that he could radio direction to them. So that he didn't have to go back and forth between these buildings. Yeah. He would stay here, watch them probably through the see what they're doing, go, no, do more of this, and he would talk to him over a wireless headset.
I mean, that's interesting, too, because that's the only way we, the audience, see them.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was part of it, too, Yeah, he wanted to, because we're seeing them from there, so it wouldn't make sense for him to be over there directing them without knowing what they look like from our perspective, that sort of thing. This is the only movie in which Grace Kelly is seen with a cigarette. She refused to smoke in movies except for this one for some reason. This film has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's on a list of, there's more than you think that have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's not a huge list, but there are more than you think. It's a lot of older movies too, because a lot of times they don't get reviewed until more modern times. They don't have quite as many reviews as like the big blockbuster that came out that got reviewed by 400 people. Or whatever. But anyways, it has 100%. It's one of the, a couple hundred that have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And finally, Roger Ebert, on the re-release of the film, when he reviewed it, said that the film, quote, developed such a clean, uncluttered line from beginning to end that we're drawn through it and into it effortlessly. The experience is not so much like watching a movie as like spying on your neighbors. So, I'm really looking forward to watching this movie. It's one of those ones that I just, for whatever reason, have never seen. I think we did watch part of it in one of my film classes.
We watched it in a film class that I took.
I think we watched like a scene or two from it, but I have not seen the whole thing. I don't know the story. I mean, I know vaguely that he thinks he witnesses a murder and blah, blah, blah. I know that, but I don't know what happens or anything. So I'm really looking forward to watching it and seeing kind of how it plays out. And how it compares to the short story. So.
Yeah, and speaking of the short story, I did find a PDF of it, so I am going to post that on our Facebook and Twitter pages. So if you want to read it before we talk about it, before you watch the movie too, that'll be available to you on our Facebook and on our Twitter pages.
All right, awesome. Sounds good. And that will be in 1 week's time, where you can come back and hear our discussion of Rear Window. Until that time, you can do us a favor, rate and review us on all of the podcast downloading services, wherever you may listen to us. That would be a great help and service to us. You can also follow us on all of the social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and we also have a subreddit. And I believe that's it. So until next time, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else, keep reading, keep watching movies.
Keep reading books.
And keep being awesome.